Hello, it's Sophia O'Neill, the course director for our APAC Masters in Practice-Based Play Therapy. And I am lucky enough to be sitting today talking to Katherine. Katherine Jackson has completed her Masters just recently and is going to tell us a little bit about it. Katherine, thank you so much for lending this time. I can't wait to hear more about it now that you're out the other side. For our listeners, can you share a little bit about what your study was and what led you to start it in the first place?
Yeah, so my study was on the topic of the therapeutic use of DENS in play therapy, although it kind of went beyond that, I think, because DENS are something that it seems like we are, as humans, instinctively drawn to, whether it be as a way of part of a process of processing something, or just as part of life, I suppose. So the study kind of took me to all of those different areas. But what drew me to it in the first place was seeing that clients, I'd have a few things in my kit that might suggest they could be used for DENS, but it was more the found things, I think, the way that clients would use maybe the long-tailed fans that we have for movement, or obviously furniture in the room, tables. I'd have some blankets and sheets and things like that. And I've since added more kind of den stuff like pegs and things like that. But initially, it was more them just finding a way to create that smaller space within a space. And then kind of just talking to other people about their own childhood experiences, it seemed like everybody had a den story. So I did do my dissertation, not my dissertation, but my essay for the diploma part on DENS when we were thinking about research and what might we like to research. And I think the passion kind of took me from there, and that's what made me so determined to actually carry out the research.
It's fascinating, and I'm sure that people listening to this will be really familiar with children creating spaces within a space. And we're so aware of theoretical concepts about containment and holding and of a safe space of the room, and then the sand tray or boxes that children keep work in. It must be there must have been a very universally human aspect to this as you spoke to people.
Certainly, and I think the way that I conducted semi-structured interviews as part of the research study, and I asked the participants, they were all play therapists, but I did ask them about their own experiences of den making as well, because it seemed an important part. With the other experiential training that we do, we don't kind of bring in tools unless we've considered how they might make us feel, or what other connotations we might have with them. So it was really interesting to kind of hear about their own, and they did all have their own den stories to share, as well as having seen their clients drawn to them in their practice, whether that be a kind of existing suggested den space, if people have pop-up tents and things like that. It kind of, and that's where, when I came on to writing the theory that the research led towards, the important part of that was defining what a den actually is, because there were so many different things that it seemed to encompass. So that was part of it.
So walk us through then how you designed your study, how you collected information about this. What did it look like?
So it was a mixed method study. So I had a questionnaire that went out on Good to Know, which collected some initial information. Obviously, once you've got that in, you think of, oh, I could have asked this and I could have asked that. But it did give me some basic, have you seen clients creating dens, for example, for one thing? And I had a good response to that. I had almost 100 responses, which was a pretty good response, which gave me an idea that yes, this was a thing that was definitely happening. And I asked about whether you had memories of your own den experiences as well, and also kind of things that might, I wasn't sure at that stage. I tried to remain really open-minded, because I knew that for the second part of the study, that was going to be the qualitative part of the study, I'd be using grounded theory, which, really requires you to kind of remain open-minded. And that's really difficult when you've already collected a little bit of information to get you started. So whilst trying to stay as true as possible to grounded theory, I think that had to be within the confines of an MA study, rather than, I kept thinking this could be a PhD study, you know, because
Yes.
it could get away with me and get bigger and bigger. So yes, that's how my design was. It was mixed methods. So I had initially that questionnaire, and then I found 9 play therapists that I interviewed in quite a lot of detail. And then that was carefully coded and went through all the processes of grounded theory to reach a point of saturation where I felt I could quite confidently suggest a theory, which of course somebody may come along and add to or disprove, or, you know, might kind of question my theory. But I think it's a good starting point, because there didn't seem to be, when I did my literature review, there didn't seem to be very much existing research around DENS. And I was amazed at that, because such a topic that everybody had something to say about, and yet there didn't seem to have really been that. I found little bits, but especially not really related to play therapy. So that's where I tried to make this study really, really kind of different and set apart.
Fascinating. I hope a PhD comes next. Please do let us know then what your findings were.
So initially, the first part of writing the theory was to create a definition for DENS. And as I said, I kept that as open as possible, because, you know, there were things like in the research, somebody who'd considered the bath a den because of that containment feel. And that was really interesting when it came to kind of linking with ideas of the womb, etc. There's that fluid there. And, you know, there were so many metaphors that kind of started to reveal themselves, that my definition literally stayed as open as a space within a space. It doesn't, because some people are saying, oh, I don't know if it needs to be enclosed, I don't know if it needs to have this or that or boundary. But actually, what seemed to appear from the research was that it was about meeting your own individual needs. There was a big link between needs. And whereas often people think of a den, and I think we have started to make that assumption a little bit, that a den is a safe space. And whenever I've mentioned that I'm doing dens, I say, oh yeah, safe space. But actually, sometimes what was revealing itself in the data was that it could be about that titration of danger within safety. So often darkness or danger or threat and other things like that would appear. So although there was definitely a lot of stuff about safety as well, it didn't seem to all be about that. So the link between need meeting seemed to be a big part of it. So as part of my theory, I came up with a little acronym for DENS. So the D became dance of attunement. The E was everything is transitory. The N was needs are not fixed, and the S is spaces can be transformative. So that kind of really seemed to link together the threads. There was a lot in the needs and the processes, and I was trying to find something that was new as well, because a lot of what I was coming up with from the data I felt was existing within our theory in play therapy, because there was stuff about attunement there was stuff about, as you said, containment, there was stuff about lots of things where there's existing theory. So I was like, what's different, what's new here? And the new thing was DENS themselves, I think, and putting the therapist within that as well, because often den making can be a solitary or kind of a peer, you know, with friends or others. It could be that kind of thing. So the different thing that came out of the theory itself that I was creating was how we as therapists can be with that process, and how we need to be aware of the transitory nature of when the need that's being met or attempted or part met is about safety, when it might be about connection, when it might actually be about creativity, and what part we need to play within that. And then also, of course, considering our own process, dual process that's going on at the same time. So if we haven't really considered what DENS might mean to us, then how are we going to do that? So how are we going to see if we become dysregulated when invited into the den? Might we have concerns around the safeguarding element of a small space with another child, if we haven't considered all of those things and we haven't covered it within our training thus far? So yes, lots there within the theory really, but I did encapsulate it within that acronym.
I'm going to have to write it down, listen back and write it down and look at it. It had so much within it, as a true den would. The acronym really, I suppose, brought to mind to me right to the forefront that all of this play making, art making, music making, den making happens underpinned by the therapeutic relationship. So that attunement that you are saying is critical to the den making. It's within the therapeutic relationship that the den is happening, the den making or den designing, and then den inhabiting or the co-creation of it. So what an incredibly interesting thing for our trainee therapists and our trained therapists to consider this as another aspect of play and relational dynamics within the therapeutic relationship.
Absolutely. I think, as you say, that attunement and piece is really key, and our kind of therapist role of what is required, what need are they trying to meet in this moment of the den, whether it be construction or time inside. There's, obviously a lot of metaphor there about metamorphosis, and they're coming at emergence out of the den, and what's our role within that? What do we just, sometimes it is about just witnessing, but sometimes it's about collaboration. Sometimes it might be about being in it together. And I thought a lot definitely about the Lisa Dion 1 foot in, 1 foot out, in kind of keeping that balance and balancing our own needs and that transitory process within the whole process of the client as well. Yeah.
And for the therapist to remain able to think really clearly and clinically about what it is that's happening. And the other parts of your acronym really drew to mind the constant changing process of play, whether in whatever aspect is being explored at the time, but in this instance, dens. So much here discovered and really carefully unpacked and named and understood by you. Where are we going to see this next? Do you have plans yet about where you're going to take it?
Yeah, I think I do. So really, it really inspired me on the MA course to think of our research as something that we can take forward after, we're not going to let it go dusty on the shelf. And I think as soon as I finished, really, obviously I wanted to wait until it had gone through the university board. But once that had happened, even before that happened, I was already thinking about, okay, so I was writing a therapeutic story about kind of like what's on the menu of what are these things and what ingredients could we offer that might, because although, as I've said, it's kind of an instinctive thing, is there a way that we can offer that more as a part of our toolkit? So yes, starting to write that therapeutic story, develop that then maybe into a training which sets out, possibly a CPD training which sets out the possibilities. And I know for myself, when the main thing that I was concerned about when considering dens, I was so excited by it, but I was also had a little bit of apprehension around the safeguarding side of things. And I think that having done the research, it's made me feel really confident in the way that I use dens within my practice. So I'd love to be able to share that really, so that the power of them could be fully harnessed. And it came through from the participants as well, that they were like, that they just felt really passionate, and they were saying, oh, please, take this further, and please, can we have some training about this? And there was something in one of the Play for Life journals recently that was another person saying the same thing of, we need to know more about this, we need to understand how to use this. So yes, I would love to continue to develop that as a training that I could offer. Thinking more grandly than that, I love to develop it into a book as well, probably adapt my MA study to be suitable to appear in a journal, and for other people to maybe take it on in their own direction as well, because I know that this felt like an initial piece of research really, and it did feel there were lots of different directions that it could go on from there. So yeah, definitely the kind of bubbling away with excitement still around the topic, and haven't forgotten about it. And when I did read that other article, I was like, oh, there's some more books in the bibliography here, and ordered some more. So I haven't stopped reading either. I think that was another big thing about my study, was that I was reading a book at the time called Think Again, which is by a guy called Adam Grant, and it's about having the ability to rethink. So once we've got an idea, you know, how can we, if somebody else does come along and say something different, do we have the ability to be able to keep open-minded? And in grounded theory, that's essential. It was a big learning curve for me. So and constantly memoing to keep my process out, you know, from affecting the data. And I love the process of that. So it's something I think has really probably changed me as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that's not going to be going dusty on a shelf.
Well, good. I'm delighted to hear about that. And there seems that, you know, the uptake from your questionnaire and the engagement you had from participants just in an MA study, which, as you've explained, this was a big idea, but you had to do it in a relatively small way, just for the master's own shape. I'm so pleased to hear all the ways in which you're going to grow it out for us from this, because there's clearly a real thirst for more knowledge on this, and recognition amongst clinicians that this is a theme that they've seen in their own work.
Oh yeah, and just to add to that, well, I was just thinking about how it also came about, I guess, that I was doing it in the first place, because during the pandemic I was building some dens for myself, you know, that time and space, you know, when you're locked inside. And I think a lot of people saw a growth in den making during that time, because although we had a space, it was trying to find a space that was just to meet our own needs. And so I think there's a place for it within self-care as well, of considering, finding a way to consider our needs and use dens as a tool to help go some way to meeting them. So that came out of the data as well, and that's something that I'd really like to make part of the training, because I think we're always looking for new ways, aren't we, to look after ourselves as well. So yeah, lots
most definitely. And the more that we consider this for our work, the more, as you say, there's the other side of considering something for one's own work is to consider what it means for oneself. So you'd hope that reflective process and the ability, as you were also saying, to rethink and not hold on to pre-held biases, but to the iterative process of learning and taking on. Thank you so very much for your time, Katherine. I'm very generous. I'm very grateful of you being generous in giving your time. I think it's, I hope that listening to this will spur lots of people on to hear what you're doing next, to read your dissertation and listen out for CPD from you in the future.
Well, it really was such an enriching process. So it's a big thank you to you as well for making it that way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.